What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Good Wolf Project. I'm your host, Jerry Scarlato. Today, I want to talk to you about doing what matters versus doing more. This topic is a perfect extension of what we talked about last week, the difference between shooting for higher highs versus shooting for higher lows, and how so many people get burnt out because they're constantly shooting for higher highs, always trying to just do more or expand more or add more instead of bringing up their downtime. Many people crash and burn, and when they crash and burn, you have to get yourself back to a baseline and then work back up toward those highs again. And that process, of course, takes time, and within that time is lost effort. So if you didn't listen to last week's podcast, make sure you go back and do that, because I'm not going to go through that whole thing today. But today we're going to basically extend last week's conversation and talk about how we can start to focus more on the things that we're trying to accomplish versus just doing more things. Because as human beings, we have this terrible tendency to want to just do more things for the sake of doing more things for many reasons, which we'll get to in a second. But first, before we jump into that, if you know anybody that keeps piling things onto their plate and they keep getting burnt out and they keep just wanting to add more, but they keep complaining that they're not making any progress, make sure that you share this episode with them, because it's going to be a perfect topic for them to maybe build some awareness around how they're driving themselves nuts because they're just doing more stuff and doing more shit and adding more things to their life instead of prioritizing the things that matter. So this will be a big one for you, and this will also be a big one for anybody in your life that is going through this same process. So make sure you share that with them, and I definitely am grateful for any sharing and any listening and watching that you do of this show nonetheless. So also, I'll mention that there'll be a couple of, changes is probably not the right word, but last year we did a ton of interviews. All of them were remote, and I just got burnt out on doing remote stuff. I can see why when COVID shut down, people got burnt to fuck about being on Zoom calls all the time. And like all of our interviews last year were on Zoom, and I just got bored of it. So I got the studio set up to be able to do in-person interviews again, and just kind of went on a solo episode rampage here for a couple months. So over the next couple weeks, we'll be throwing in some more interviews, which will be nice. We'll have more people than just me sitting here yapping at you over and over again. So I'm sure you'll appreciate that. Nonetheless, let's jump into what we're going to talk about today, doing more of what matters instead of more for the sake of doing more. So there's two things that play a part in us as humans wanting to do more and be active. Now, naturally, human beings are active beings. Actually, there's a complete contradiction inside of us. Two things are always right at the same time, almost always right at the same time. One is that our body wants to conserve energy, so it wants to just lay around and do nothing. And most people give in to that temptation to sit around and do nothing. That's why most of society is fat, obese, and overweight. But on this other side is this human drive to move and to go and to make progress and to move forward, because our ancestors had to constantly be moving and going and making progress and searching for food and searching for shelter and making sure that there wasn't a lion, tiger, or bear around the corner. We had to constantly be doing that thing. Otherwise, we would die. Just things wouldn't happen well. So we have this tendency as human beings to do more, to do things because of that evolutionarily built in sequence to just keep doing things. So we have that inside of us. And at the same time, we have this social pressure that we need to be busy. That's why whenever you ask somebody how they're doing, if they say something like, oh, there's not a lot going on, I'm not really a whole lot going on, you might feel yourself judging them like, oh, this lazy ass not doing anything. What's wrong with this person? everyone feels the pressure to be busy or at least say that they're busy. So between these two things, we have built in this belief that we have to be busy, we have to be doing something in order to feel like we're productive in the world, in order to feel like society accepts us, and to kind of like scratch this evolutionary itch that we have that drives us to keep doing things, to have more things that we do. So that leads us to just sometimes overwhelming our schedule. And here's what happens. And this is a big reason why so many people feel like they don't have time to do the things that matter, to do more of the things that they want to do and that they want to accomplish, because their time has been filled up. Their time is currently potentially full of things. But there's a big, gigantic difference between things and shit that matters. Here's what happens. There's this law called Parkinson's Law. And Parkinson's Law basically states that a task will take up the amount of time allotted to it. I've talked about this law in the past, and I'll talk about it many more times in the future because it is that important. So what Parkinson's Law is saying is twofold. Number one, that if you have a task that you're currently doing, it's just going to take up whatever amount of time you allot to it, which for most people is not, they don't allot a time to a thing. They just start doing a thing. And then whenever they do it and it's done, then it's done. And then they go to the next thing. So they don't decide on an amount of time that they are going to complete the thing. They just start adding things and then they start doing them. On the other part of that is, if you don't add a thing into your life and you don't set aside the time to do it and you don't allot an amount of time to do it, then guess what? It's not going to fucking just show up on its own. It's just not going to work. So people say, I don't have the time to do this thing that matters to me because all of my time is taken up by these things over here. But most people don't know what these things over here really is, which leads me to another idea, which is entropy. Entropy basically is an idea in physics, I believe is where it comes from, that things will move toward chaos. Your life, all things will, over time, just move toward chaos. And unless you bring order to them and pay attention to them, then they'll move toward chaos. Like, that's what's going to happen. If you think about your house, for instance, if you have kids especially, you get everything cleaned up one day. You're like, hey, like, we got to clean this shit up. We got to make sure that we keep this place clean. So you and the whole family clean, just like spring cleaning, clean the house, purge of all the nonsense, and everything's beautiful. And you're like, great, this is how it's going to be forever. We're going to keep it this way. We're going to put things back where we found them. This is the way we're going to keep it. And what happens? A week later, things are just a complete mess again. That is entropy. That is things moving toward chaos. And that's the way your schedule is. That is the way your doing of things is. You start adding things into your day. You start adding things into your life. And eventually things move to chaos. And you tell yourself, I just don't have time to do these things anymore. I don't have, not these things, but I don't have time to do the things that matter because I have all of this stack of stuff that I have going on. So between the natural tendency for things to move to chaos and Parkinson's Law, which if I'm not allotting a specific amount of time to do the things I'm currently doing, and I'm not allotting a specific amount of time to do the things I want to do, then guess what? The things that I want to do are not going to just randomly show up on my schedule, and time is not just magically going to open up. If you can understand those two things, then you can start to work toward unpacking them. You can start to work toward actually making something more of your day and more of your time. In order to do that, though, it takes work. It takes diligence. It takes regular, ongoing looking at what you're doing to make sure that you're doing the things that you want to do, not the things that you feel like you either have to do or should do or that everybody else is telling you that you should do. You're doing the things that fucking matter to you, the things that are making progress in your life, the things that are moving you forward. So in order to do that, and I'll probably do a much more extensive episode on this down the road, but in order to do that, there's a couple things that you need to do. First and foremost, you have to start by understanding where you are. Until or unless you make the unconscious conscious, it'll dictate your life and you will call it fate. Most people say, I don't have time because I have all these things that I'm doing, but they have no damn clue what they're actually doing. You feel like you do because at the end of the day, you're like, man, I feel like I just did a bunch of things, or I feel exhausted or whatever. But do you really know what you're doing? So if you don't know what you're doing, which most people don't, and I can tell you this from experience, from working with thousands of people over the years, when it comes to them trying to figure out how to fit exercise into their life or make lifestyle changes or do whatever, people don't know what they're doing. And unless you figure that out, you will not change it. So it starts by understanding what you're doing. Where are you currently spending your time? Take some time, and you can do one of two things. Number one, you can just sit down right now, get a piece of paper out, and make 2 columns. On the left column are literally all the things that you've done, say, over the last 3 to 5 days. And on the right column is all of the time that you spent during that 3 to 5 days doing that thing. So if you're looking at the last 3 days, how much time in either minutes or hours have you spent doing that thing in the last 3 days? And what is the item? So social media will be a big one for people. Now, here's the important part. You have to be honest on all of this. And luckily for us, or unluckily, depending on how you look at it, when it comes to screen time, our phones track all that for us. So you can go and you can look at your phone and you can see exactly how much time you're spending on that thing, which is a huge time suck, by the way. I don't have time? Bullshit. Look at how much time you're spending on your phone. So write down all the things that you've done over the last 3 to 5 days and how much time you've spent doing them. That will help you build awareness around the things that you're currently doing, the things that you're currently spending your time on. And when I say everything, I mean get as detailed as you can. You need the big things. Work, write work down, drive time, what you do in the morning, whatever that looks like, social media, TV, all of these things. Write it down, because unless you build awareness to it, then you cannot make changes to it. The next thing that we need to do is figure out what we can change. What can I delete? What can I reduce? What can I maybe give to somebody else? Once I have all the tasks, I can look and I can go, okay, if I'm honest with myself, and this is the important part because most people think that this is something that I have to do because of whatever reason. Oh, I got to look at social media because it really helps my brain. No, it doesn't. It makes you dumber, makes you stupid, literally gives you dementia. It's just, I'm not saying that it's you. I mean, I certainly use social media, most definitely, but I use it. It doesn't use me. So you have to decide what that trade-off is for you. So if you find yourself justifying these things in your life, there's a good chance that it probably is not actually important. You're just justifying that it's important. So when you look at the things, answer the question, if this thing were not in my life, would my life actually change? Would my life actually be worse off? And be real about it. And I'm not saying that means you're going to eliminate it, but it means you may reduce it. And if you reduce it, then at least you've reduced it and you've opened up some time. So if you recognize that you're spending 2 hours on your phone, which a lot of people are, most people are, If you recognize that and you realize that, then you can shrink it down. Okay, well, what happens if I only spend 1 hour on my phone? Then what happens? What happens if I only spend 30 minutes on my phone? Eventually, I think you'll be pleasantly surprised to recognize that you could not spend a lot of time on there and you're going to be plenty happy, if not happier. But that's up for you to decide. So you look at all the things that you do, you look at where you're spending big chunks of time, and you go, okay, what are the things that I can change? What are the things that I can reduce, eliminate, or potentially hand off to somebody else? The things that you can hand off are simple things like, especially freaking housework. Like, housework is such a waste of time. Cutting grass, cleaning your house, any kind of yard work, all of that can be delegated to somebody else. You can hire out for that. Like, a lot of things you do around the house, you could definitely delegate to somebody else. Well, Jerry, that costs money. Well, yeah, it costs money. The question is are the things that you want to do in life, are those worth more in experience than that money is that you're going to spend? That $60 a month or whatever, or $100 a month that you might spend to pay somebody else to cut your grass, it's probably more than that. I don't know. I couldn't really tell you. Used to have somebody cut our grass, and I don't really remember what in the world we paid them. A couple $100 a month. Anyway, is that couple $100 a month really worth like you spending the time to do that versus you putting that time somewhere else to have an experience in life, to go do something with your family, to not bitch and complain about not having the time? So trade-offs, like what's that balance look like for you? Okay. So once we've built awareness around where we are, once we have started to decide what we're going to do, we have to then put that into practice. We actually have to do something with it, and we have to take action on it. And then we have to track it. We have to regularly review what we're doing to make sure that we're not getting off track. And this is where a lot of people lose sight. They start to do something, nutrition. I start to make changes and I pay attention, and then eventually I stop paying attention and things go back to where they were, and I end up putting all the weight back on. So regularly pay attention to what you're doing. Every week, sit down and say, how am I doing? Am I staying on task? Am I letting things creep into my life that I don't need to do? Do I feel the urge to add more things for the sake of adding more things? Write down a couple of questions that you want to answer each week and then answer those questions. And just regularly follow along to see how you're doing. And if you just do that basic cycle, then you will start to do more of what matters. Which brings me to my second point. You have to know what matters. You have to know, of course, what those things are in life that you want to work toward. So we all have those goals. We all have those self-development, self-improvement, financial improvement, family improvement. We all have those things that we want to work on, which are the things that get set aside for another time. I'll do these things later. These are things I should do, but I'm going to do them later because I don't have the time now. Well, when you start to pay attention to where you're spending your time, you start to make changes around your time, then you have the opportunity to start to plug those things in. Now I can do this. Now I can exercise. Now I can change what I eat. Now I can start to learn how to invest. I can start to learn real estate. I can start to work on my own business. I can start to do what it is I want to do. You can plug that into the current time that you're shoveling out, all the nonsense, the entropy that's built up over time. So what are the things that you want to do? What are the things that matter to you? Do you want to spend more time with your family? Do you want to have more experiences with your family? Do you want to start a business? Do you want to learn real estate? Do you want to start to exercise? Do you want to eat better? Do you want to do these things? All of these things take mental energy. They take time energy. They take financial energy. All of that is true. But if you open up space in your life to actually do these things, and part of the doing is thinking about how to do them, and then developing a plan and then taking action on it, which is most of it. If you set aside the time to do that, then you can actually plug that into your time. But you have to plug it in. Remember, things will take up the amount of time allotted to them. So now that you have opened up time and you know what matters to you, you decide what things you need to start doing to make those things happen in your life, and then you plug that into your day. But you don't negotiate about it. Most people negotiate about exercise. They negotiate about eating good. They negotiate about saving money. They negotiate about self-development. They negotiate about learning how to do real estate. They negotiate about these things. Well, I just, it's been a long day. Well, I don't really feel like reading today. Well, whatever negotiation you're doing with yourself, you can't do that. Once you've plugged it in and you said, this is what I'm going to do, and this is how much time I'm going to spend on that today, do it. And then you become the kind of person that starts to do the things that you want to do in life. And you start to make progress toward those things. And you start to see it happen. And then those things start to take up more of your time, which is great, because that's the fucking point. To do the things that you want to do in life. To grow in life. To build a life. To make life happen for you instead of let life happen to you. And a gigantic, not gigantic, I would say the major part of that is not just filling your time up and your day up with things to do, but doing things on purpose. Building your day toward the things that are moving you forward. Now, this is, admittedly, it's hard and it's challenging, which is why most people don't do it, which is why most people fail, which is why most people maybe don't even try in the first place. But it is simply a matter of knowing where you're spending your time, getting rid of the things that don't matter, and then starting to plug in those things that do matter, and then paying attention. Simple, not easy. Don't make it more complex than what it is. It is not complex. It is simple, but not easy. But if you want to achieve those things in life, if you want to make progress in life, if you want to move forward, it is the price you pay to make that happen. But here's the beautiful thing. When you start to do this and you start to make progress and you start to move forward, you actually have more time. Even though you might be spending a lot of time now exercising or building a business or working on investing or doing whatever, you actually end up having more time because suddenly you don't feel this urge to do all these other things. Suddenly you don't feel the urge to just fill your life with unnecessary bullshit that is just weighing you down. You're doing things on purpose, taking action on purpose, and you're putting energy toward that action. And all of a sudden, it's like all this time starts to open up because you are recognizing that when you put your energy into the things that matter, your life moves forward a lot more. But then you don't feel the urge to put the energy into the other things, to think about the other things, to fulfill society's need to push you to want to do more. Fuck society. You decide what you want to do. That's why when you look at many successful people are like, well, they're all a bunch of lazy asses. They don't do anything. Like, I know a bunch of people that own businesses and it feels like they're never working. Well, first of all, that's not how it always was. But second of all, it's not that. I would argue that, it is a fact. Those people get more done in probably 3 hours of work a day that they may work than most people do in 8 hours of work or 10 hours of work. But it's because of their focused effort. Because they don't feel the need They're saving their energy for that focused effort, for that time that they're working on the things that matter. And when you can shift your mindset around that, it all changes. But you have to do it. You have to decide to do it, and then you have to implement it. So make this happen. Make this work for you. You have one shot. Make that one shot the best shot that you can. Eliminate the stuff that is not fulfilling your life. Don't fool yourself into thinking that you need these things in your life to make you happy. Society is what fools you into thinking that, by the way. But don't fool yourself into it. You are the easiest one to fool, and you have to recognize that. Don't fool yourself into thinking that these things are important. What's important to you? What do you want? What do you want out of life? And then decide, and then do. Then we can do more of what matters, and then we can build something that matters. Okay, remember, you guys, to share this with anybody else who's having trouble, who's doing a lot of things but not making a lot of progress. Thanks so much for listening to me babble. And until next time, get out there and make something happen.